Horror. The genre allows certain films to explore the use of disability representation, such as through the works of Ari Aster, Don't Breathe, Shut In, and Freaks. Yet, when thinking about these films in particular, there is a message of disability being clearly used as a mechanism of spectacle. Let's unpack this. Ari Aster has been accused of overt ableism in his works of Hereditary and Midsommar, regarding both the mental and physical disabilities shown on screen. In an interview with Forbes, Aster addresses the physically disabled character, Reuben, or the Oracle, in Midsommar. He says, Reuben in Midsommar is a very important character. He's important more as a symbol, as an idea, than he is even as a character. This statement justifies the use of disability on film, but does not erase the fact that...
And for a character who has maybe 2 full minutes of screen time, the Oracle's look was played up a lot in advertising as well. Because on one hand, I'm very glad that Ari Aster didn't choose to ruin the life of some random disabled person, but on the other hand, it shows just how deliberate a choice this was. One does not accidentally put 5 hours of makeup on a child actor.
Evidently, Aster has characterized his disabled characters in problematic ways. Thus, physical disabilities in horror films expand its diversity and visible appearance, but unless the film demonstrates how a disabled character takes agency in their disability, these films will ultimately stereotype disabled people into 2 categories: monster or victim. Inevitably, the real-world impact is the isolation of the disabled community. Audiences understand the stereotypical monster that is identified as such. However, as horror films add more realistic elements, disability becomes the new monster. Horror films can imply that disabled individuals are to be feared as monsters, since it adds to unfamiliarity. Visible disabilities have been a core part of many horror films through body horror imagery. However, for this argument, we'll be focusing on examples that explicitly demonstrate the disabilities rather than the monsters that indirectly have disabilities. Don't Breathe stars a blind man who is notable by his white glossed eyes, but his appearance deceives burglars into thinking he is vulnerable, when in actuality, he has malicious intentions to harm the young woman that breaks into his home. What is interesting about Don't Breathe is how the villain fell into both categories of being the initial victim at first, but ultimately was depicted as a monster. Here, it remains evident that the antagonist can overcome the intruders because his hearing is elevated. Yet, the cataracts are heightened in color and texture to offer the monster element that instills disgust within the audience. Since the blind man is monstrous in his intentions to assault the female protagonist, his visible disability is monstrous as well. Another example exists within the contemporary example of Midsommar. The sole disabled character, Reuben, or the Oracle, appeared on screen for his demented look. Besides the ethics in purposely creating a deformed character, the writing suggested that Reuben was a monster who was viciously murdered one of the guests at the festival. Without any scenes to reassert agency, Reuben was supposed to be treated as a villain who murders. Although the Oracle in Midsommar is made to be a highly regarded character in the cult's culture, the audience follows the perspective of the American protagonist, who have an opposing culture shock that demonstrates negativity towards all the cult aspects, including Reuben.
Who decides what gets added?
Well, this iteration is being written by Reuben.
The disabled?
Since birth. He draws, and we, the elders, interpret. You see, Josh, Reuben is unclouded by normal cognition. It makes him open for the source.
What happens when Reuben dies? Do you just wait for a baby that is not clouded?
No. Reuben was oracles are deliberate products of inbreeding.
The explanation proves to be horrifying as these individuals purposely planned to create a disabled child. This amplifies the notion that the result of disability is in itself to be feared. The audience learns that it is reasonable to become scared of a disabled child simply because they look different. However, the later murder Ruben commits supports the notion of needing to other from a disabled person. From this category, the opposing characteristics of pure weakness exist in its own stereotypical category. The horror genre suggests that disabled individuals are to be pitied as victims. While the audience is not expected to fear the disabled representation, the audience recognizes those with disabilities as to be pitied because of their vulnerable positions. Within the contemporary example of Hereditary, the character with a facial deformity, Charlie, is depicted as a strange loner and dies by a tragic means, which allows the audience to feel pity for her. Since her character was othered by strange tendencies, audiences can correlate their pity for her passing with her deformity. Since Aster is the director of Hereditary and Midsommar, he utilizes disability representation in a way that suggests ableism. By further outcasting a girl with a facial deformity and a man with deformities across his body through their daunting personalities, audiences can digest the message of othering others with disabilities because they prove to be dangerous and menacing, which is a harmful notion to the disabled community. Straying away from the Aster examples, Shut In features Stephen, a character who is completely paralyzed, which adds a resentment from his stepmother to be a caretaker. The audience pities Stephen for his condition, but sympathizes with the notion that disability is a burden as the stepmother sees it. We can consider how scholar Russell Mueff refers to disability directly as an outsider to the norm established by society's normal bodies. His book chapter hones in on the film analysis of The Wings of Eagles, but the argument and writing demonstrates the audience's perspective of movies, which is an acquired disability from war is a debilitating condition that removes one's purpose in life. Disability representation surrounding these movies is all around negative as disability is made to be a terrifying ordeal a human can have because they'll be a pitied victim. This shows how that disabled bodies in comparison to normal bodies have a different range of connotations, which are mostly negative. Pity, stemming from victimization, reinforces the idea that the audience must feel sorry for the one with a visible disability because they would not wish to be in a seemingly vulnerable position. Even though these two categories establish the main view of disability and horror, a third can emerge as an option for filmmakers to consider. Once a disabled character secures agency as either a hero or strong personality, then the audience will not perceive those with physical disabilities as othered from society. In the film Freaks, the characters fight against their oppressors and save the day. Despite the negative audience perception at the time of its release, due to being a mostly disabled cast, Todd Browning broke barriers in having a mostly disabled cast demonstrate positive characteristics, such as confidence, teamwork, and empathy. Freaks remains as the prime and perhaps the only example of a mostly disabled cast that offers high exposure for disability representation. This representation, for better or worse, embodies an experience for those with physical disabilities. While the film accentuates stereotypes and discrimination for those labeled as freaks,
Go away, all of you! Don't you know trespassing the same as stealing?
What are you, a man or a baby? I am Madame Tetralini. These children are in my circus.
Children? They're monsters. Oh, you're so...
the movie offers complex characters and storylines that are typically offered to able-bodied actors. With the prominence of the film left in the industry, some actors were able to attain future roles, which allowed them their own agency in their life as their characters had in Freaks, such as Harry Earls, the actor who plays Hans. From the beginning of the film, the audience becomes familiar with the protagonist Hans. This perspective from a disabled character allows the audience to empathize and understand Hans beyond his disability. When the revenge plot of getting rid of the antagonist in the film occurs, the audience views this event as an act of agency against the discrimination and dehumanization from the able-bodied characters that occurred throughout the entire film. With the accumulation of the stereotyped categories emerging, the significance of these categories lead to the ultimate issue of impacting the audience. Despite horror films providing a platform for disability representation, movies cultivate and transfer negative emotions of physical disability for general audiences. The ideas posed by Carl Plantinga identify transfer and cultivate as mechanisms that can influence audiences in their daily life. While the fictional world may not directly encapsulate the entire reality of the real world, the emotions garnered through empathy and sympathy can lead to a transference and cultivation of ideas in real life.
We feel sad for them, or we're happy when they rejoice. We want things in relation to their concerns. Doesn't that mean we're fundamentally irrational?
It becomes an ethical dilemma as negative viewpoints from film indirectly impact the perspective on marginalized groups such as the disabled community. Whether it is a matter of reducing creative freedom, filmmakers ought to be aware of the inevitable effect of movies impacting audiences in some shape, way, or form. Cultivation and transference establish the result of perpetuating the stereotype categories. Focusing on current audiences' perceptions toward disability based on viewing the selected horror films highlights the core issue of stereotypes used within particular horror films, which is cementing ideas of discomfort, fear, and pity surrounding the treatment of disability in the real world.